Hey, this is Terry with Openly Concealed, and I am here with my special guest today. And when I say special, we all know what I mean by that. But so this is my brother Joe, my older brother Joe. And so I thought today's segment we would talk a little bit about growing up in the pawn business, world's largest pawn shop in Fruitland, Idaho. So, working for my dad for a lot of years, and both of us in and out, me more than everybody else.
Well, you may have been in, but you were still out.
Yeah, I was on the outskirts. So anyway, and just talking about some of the horror stories of the pawn business, and one of the reasons I do what I do today is probably because of this fella right here.
Yeah, I was thinking, had that not happened, you wouldn't be doing this.
Probably not. Probably not. There are a couple of things that happened. We're going to talk about those stories today. What happened in the pawn business that really spurred me to do what I do, on top of my wife, who will be guest star here soon, but really kind of got me into doing what I do today. I mean, there are some key things that happened in the pawn business that I think sent my trajectory this way. And if a few things would have changed, it probably, who knows where I'd be right now.
Well, by your confession, then, that means you should be giving me some royalties.
Negative. I'll give you a royalty right over the head. So anyway, the first thing I want to talk about is the thing that really kind of like got me geared into this idea of teaching people how to not do dumb things. So do you want to tell the story, or do you want me to tell the story?
Well, I guess we probably can. Actually, it was simply I shot him in the pawn shop. He ticked me off. He was just being a typical little brother, and it's like, I'm not taking that, so I shot him.
Yeah, no. But so the real story is, and I remember the gun quite vividly.
Winchester Model 97.
Model 97. They called the Thumbbuster and the Widowmaker.
Exactly. Yep.
And so we were at the pawn shop. I think I was 16, so you would have been 17.
Because we're only 9 months and 15 minutes apart.
Exactly. And so Joe grabbed a Winchester Model 97 off the rack and wanted to see how it chambered, right?
Yeah, because it's an old gun and it had one of the biggest ejection and receiving mechanisms in a pump action shotgun. It also had the hammer.
This is his technical term.
Yeah, and I was just like, how does that big old bulky thing push out the empty and load up a full magazine or a full round? And I was just like, oh, let's give this a shot.
So he's intrigued by the mechanism by which this shotgun was working.
Operates.
So he grabbed a box of number 6 birdshot.
Yeah.
I don't remember what brand. I remember it was on a gray box with red letters.
And they were all plastic shells.
Yep. And so
3 rounds.
Stuffed some rounds into the chamber. He racked it. And then, so the setup was we were behind the gun counter. Mm-hmm. We were behind the gun counter. So there were rifles and shotguns to the rear of us. And then in front of us were the glass showcases for the handguns. So Joe's sitting Indian style on the floor.
Actually, just kind of knelt down, pump it in, the first one in. And unless you go all the way forward with the pump action on that, it will not come back even when you're pushing the release mechanism. And so I'm like trying to pull it back to eject because I just wanted to go through the shells, just 1, 2, 3 and be done. Well, apparently at that young age, finger control and
trigger finger etiquette
was like apparently in the wrong place.
So I was 3 feet away from him, standing with him kneeling. And as he's trying to find the button, trying to get it open, he presses the trigger. So it ricochets off the floor in between.
I'm going to have plausible deniability. I don't know if I really squeezed the trigger. It might have just got bumped.
No, you didn't squeeze it. You activated it.
Yeah.
So those of you that know me, I don't squeeze or pull the trigger. It's activate or press the trigger. So he definitely activated the trigger, which we all know starts the process by which projectiles end up out of the gun instead of in the gun. Yeah. And so anyway, he presses the trigger, ricochets off the floor, hits me in the calves, and then ricochets up, and there was a fluorescent tubing lighting right above me, and it came crashing to the ground or to the
Count
counter,
showcase across everything.
all over the
everywhere.
counter. And I look down, and all I see is Joe going,
I'm like,
dumbfounded look on
shoot.
his face.
And Terry, he looks down when he says that. He's like, Joe, you idiot! Like,
I do
like,
remember that.
It's like, yeah, okay, you're right. That was a dumb move.
And so,
but I knew he had been hit.
you did.
I did. I'm like, how could you not?
I
I'm
had
like,
no clue that I'd even been shot. And when I looked at it, I'm like, you idiot.
I'm just like,
and so I started walking down to the end of the counter, and there was if I remember right, there was like a coat rack sort of thing with those like Mork and Mindy sort of vests on it, the vest jackets. Yeah. And I got to about to that point, and I like remember almost passing out.
Yeah.
And I kind of grabbed the rack, and I'm like, what is the problem here? Still hadn't even dawned on me I've been shot. So I get back to the bathroom, and I get to the bathroom, and it felt like I had two Charlie horses. I mean, a Charlie horse in each calf. So I'm like, oh man, and I'm still not even realizing I've been shot. And so I pull my hands up, and they're just covered in blood. And next thing I know, Lugwitz over here,
I knew he'd been hit. So it's like, I'm putting the gun away, and I'm now caring for my brother. I'm like, I'm concerned because I don't know how bad this is.
And not only is he concerned, but you got to know this guy. He's like a cast iron marshmallow. So
what is a cast iron marshmallow?
Looks all rough and tough on the outside, but it's just a big ooey gooey on the inside.
That's only if you're roasted, right?
And so next thing I know, he picks me up in his arms, and he's just sobbing, taking me out to the car. Gets me out to the car, and I get to the one of the, was it Rose that worked for us?
Rose worked for us, but it was Kim's husband that took you to the hospital.
Kim.
City clerk, Rick Watkins.
Oh, Kim Watkins. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So for some reason, I thought it was Rose.
No. I warned Rose. No. That's another story.
All right. Well, we'll talk about that later. So anyway, so this person takes me to the ER, and I get patched up, and I don't really get patched up. They can't do anything for you. The guy's like, we can't do anything for you. You've already walked on all that shots, like. So, and I don't remember what the final count was.
It was either 14 or 15 pellets that were in your legs.
And so, number 6 bird shot. And so anyway, I'm fine. Well, my parents were out of town.
Yeah.
And so
I literally just came back within hours of this event. And my dad comes into the store. He's like, where's Terry? I'm like, he's at home.
Why?
I shot him.
What?
And so that just opened up a can of worms of stupid dad or stupid Joe,
Yeah.
Anyway,
so I was okay. I mean, it was sore for a while. Little pieces of shot would come out in the tub when I would take a bath, and so anyway, it didn't cause any like
permanent damage,
too much damage. But anyway, in fact. Those of you that know me know I had a kidney removed about 12 years ago. I always blame that on him for the lead poisoning. But
he blames everything on anyone but himself.
So anyway, that was that. But then, growing up being jokesters, my dad was a total jokester.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, just kind of going back to why I do what I do, that incident, I'm like, man, people need to be educated.
The thing is, even working in the pawn shop, we selling and working with guns all the time, you hear stories. People come in, they tell you stories like, wow, that's crazy. And it's like, that'll never happen to me. That'll never happen to me.
Mm-hmm.
And you just think, wow, that's, and then it happens, that happened. And it's like, no, that's.
And people don't realize when you grow up in the pawn business, it is an everyday occurrence to get a gun pointed at you.
Yeah.
People bring a gun into the pawn shop and set it on the counter, pointed right at you, the muzzle pointed right at you, and you'd be like, you'd sweep the muzzle away, and they're like, oh, I swear to God, it's unloaded. I swear to God, it's unloaded. And about 30% of the time, it wasn't. Someone you'd rack around out of their gun, whatever it was, handgun, rifle, shotgun.
And they're surprised. They're like, oh my gosh,
I would have swore to God it was unloaded. And they never were.
So it's probably a good thing your gun's in here and not still at home.
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, that was the first thing that really kind of like got me fired up about and passionate about firearms and training and just basically educating people, because that's what it boils down to. You know, guns by themselves are just a utensil. They're just a tool. They won't do anything by themselves. So anyway, that's what kind of started it. And then the other incident that really weighs in my mind, and we were both there for this, was way on earlier. I don't remember.
Yeah,
how
that would
old
have
we
been at
were.
the other building across the
So
street.
you're probably 10, 11, maybe.
Oh no, no, I'd have been older than that, but I'm not sure. But anyway, yeah, it was in the other pawn shop building, and Dad had found, or I found these caps, black powder caps, and I'm like, Dad, check this out.
What they call percussion caps.
Percussion caps, and Dad's like, oh, find me a black powder pistol, and I'll scare your mother. It's like, okay, yeah, I'm on board. That sounds good. So we find one, and he puts a cap on, walks up to her at the counter, points it at her, pulls the trigger or activates it, and it's a dud. And so he pulls the hammer back, pulls that off, and puts another one on. And this time he's pointing it above her head and activates the trigger and blows a flame out the end of it, blowing a hole in the ceiling right in her direction. And you talk about shock for all of us, was just like, holy.
And a part of the lesson here is none of us at that time knew how to check a black powder gun to see if there was a load in it. And so just putting a cap on something, that you have no clue whether or not it's actually got something in it or not. And so that, like,
you're going to do a tip of the day, but let me give you a tip on black powder. The ramming rod that does the packing, if you put it in and it goes all the way down to the percussion cap deal, that's unloaded. If that thing is sticking out at all, it's loaded. And make sure that thing goes all the way down. But anyway,
and that was something that it was just, one of those practical jokes that you don't think about.
Yeah, made my dad sick for days.
In fact, I think that's what really.
He swore off guns.
Yeah, he was never really a gun guy, but he got to the point where he didn't mind guns so much.
Yeah.
But after that, he would just in fact, he didn't come to work it was a week or 2 weeks.
Yeah, it was a little bit.
That can be very unnerving. I don't think people realize the emotional and the psychological toll that things like that can.
You call it
take
trauma,
on.
actually.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So it really freaked him out. And so those two things really kind of I think etched in my mind at a pretty young age. And I always had a propensity for knowing how things worked. I mean, I mechanically, and so I had been working on guns even at the pawn shop for a long time, because I just kind of I think for me at an early age, things just linked up. I understood mechanics, and I understood, and I was always hungry to know, well, what makes it tick? What makes
that
it
was
work?
my whole point with the 97 was I was trying to figure out what made it tick. It just, found out what made it tick and what made it boom.
It was an interesting gun because they called it a Widowmaker, a thumbbuster, because the slide came out the back and cocked the hammer on that particular weapon.
An exposed hammer, which most shotguns are concealed. The hammer is inside the
everything's
casing.
Contained. Yeah. And so anyway, when you would rack it, it had such a steep angle on the grip, it would just rake off the top of your knuckle.
Yeah.
And so it was an intriguing gun. But anyway, yeah, so there were just a lot of different things that really weighed on my mind at that young age about, man, there's got to be a better way to educate people. There's got to be a better way to, and I got very, very passionate about training, education, just learning how to do things right and not be so cavalier,
Well, and you were even in other areas of business. I think of the photocopy repair stuff. You were always educating yourself on machines and things like that. Terry's the kid that in our home would have dad's tools out in the yard and things like that, tearing things apart. and of course leaving the tools wherever the job was done.
Rusty pile of tools.
Yeah,
throughout the
more
yard.
tools spread across the yards than anybody. It's
I think as I got older, I got better at putting things back together and not leaving a mess. It was, when you first start, it's kind of like things get torn apart. They never get put back together. And then I got really good at putting things back together and learning, and my philosophy, and this is even in the gun realm. I mean, not just in the gun realm, but my philosophy is if I tell you something, I'm going to tell you why.
Yeah.
Because to me, it's important to know why we do things, not
just because I told you so.
Yeah, because
our parents raised us.
Exactly. Your parents are like, don't do that. Why not? Because I said so. Because I said so, and I'm the boss, and that's what goes. And I was like, but I want to know why. I'm very driven by what makes it tick and why we do these things. And so even in my instruction method, that is like kind of how I roll. I'm like, if I tell you to do something, I'm going to show you why we don't do it this way and why we do it this way. I would rather teach you a technique that creates success rather than failure, because there are a lot of techniques out there that create failure and mentality. This idea of not paying attention. We get, I don't know how many guys I train that they get that, I know what I'm doing. I've been doing this a long time. I'm like, and you've been doing it wrong a long time. And, just learning how to do things right. So I'm very technique oriented and the how-tos and the whys. And so I'm going to do the tip of the day, and then we're going to come back and kind of talk about another incident in the pawn business. My junior summer, so this would have been your senior summer. You were graduated. Talk about another story and a lot of things that really shaped my what I do today. And so with that, we'll kick over to the tip of the day, Terry's tip of the day, what I call Todd's. Welcome to today's tip of the day. Today's Todd. I want to talk about proper holsters. There's a lot of holster choices out there. I'm a holster manufacturer myself. I design my own holster. The main theme with any rig, there are a lot of good rigs out there. There's a lot of stuff you're going to try. Everybody's got that proverbial box of holsters. The main thing is anytime we have a holster, we want to make sure we have a few things. We're trying to balance comfort with access, with functionality. All those things kind of need to come together in a place where they just work. And one of the biggest downsides to holsters I see is getting a firing grip. From the minute the gun comes out of the holster, we should have a firing grip on it at that point, because if we don't, it's just a losing endeavor moving forward with the gun. So bare minimum, we need to have a firing grip. And so sometimes that means a lot of holsters don't have what we call a combat cut here, which is this swoop that allows you to get on the gun without grabbing holster. So that's one of the things you're looking at is access. You need to be able to get a firing grip before the gun comes out of the holster. Otherwise, you're trying to shift your grip mid-draw, and that's when guns get dropped or taken away under stress. And so as a range master, I see a lot of improper technique, a lot of improper accessing your gun and then trying to readjust it. And I see a lot of guns get dropped. And that's not even under pressure. A lot of times that's in a controlled environment because there's that sense of urgency from the instructor telling students to do this, do that. And so it creates this sense of urgency. It's not really pressure. Pressure is somebody trying to kill you. So good access to your weapon where you're not activating the trigger, finger off the trigger. You got good trigger finger etiquette coming out of the holster. Most accidental discharges happen coming out of and going back into the holster. And so we need to make sure that that holster provides protection for the trigger at bare minimum. So that's your tip of the day, and stay tuned for more tips of the day in the podcast. Each day we'll bring you a new tip. Okay, so so we're back. And so one of the things I always forget to mention, so this program is really sponsored by my training company, Idaho Enhanced Academy, as well as Ultimate Hybrid Technologies, the holster that I create. And I was an executive for another holster company and designed 2 of their best-selling holsters and then got laid off. And so the next logical choice was just to start my own company. So the holster that you saw in the tip of the day is my design. It's called an Ultimate Hybrid. It's a holster that's kind of the best of 2 worlds. It's a Kydex shell with a memory foam backer, so it's comfortable to wear, and it fits over 200 handguns with no shell change, no hardware, no tools. And so it hits the biggest market segment out there of guns with one holster, and it is very comfortable. It's my everyday carry. I carry a Glock 43X these days. And as a guy who does this as a living, people always ask me, what's your favorite concealed gun? And I'm like, it kind of changes. It goes from one weapon to another, depending on what I'm wearing, where I'm going, what I'm doing. But right now, my everyday carry is the Glock 43X, single stack 10 round 9mm, and it fits in the Ultimate Hybrid like a glove, as do a lot of guns. But anyway, so the holster that you saw in the tip of the day was the Ultimate Hybrid. So very comfortable holster, very functional, very just a good holster. Yeah, if I do say so myself.
Well, so you don't have to say anything on the concealed training, Idaho concealed. What did you call it?
Idaho Enhanced
training. I've taken 2 concealment training classes once years ago from someone else, and then I took Terry's. And I have to say, even as his brother, I was extremely impressed with his passion and his clarity of teaching and instruction.
Which in part is, probably
it wouldn't happen without me.
Yeah, that's right.
So
he's going to take credit for it. So that's
yeah,
just,
exactly.
what older brothers do.
Just what they should do. It's like, yeah, I raised you right.
So anyway, that's why I do what I do. One of the reasons I wanted to start this podcast, and I like to say too, I like to keep these podcasts organic.
That's why I didn't shower this morning.
Oh, good thing you're not in the studio. But when I say organic, I don't. I'm self-produced, as you saw with that little slip up with the wrong video getting played right up front. But anyway,
he's better at his training than he is in the producing.
And so for me, it's just about having conversations. If we can just have conversations and not be so like dogmatic about things. We all have something to learn from somebody else.
Right.
I'm a big advocate of never judge a man until you've walked a mile in his shoes. And
well, you can even learn from an idiot.
And I have. What?
I take back all those things I said earlier. Just forget that.
Yeah. Uh-huh. So
go down. No.
Anyway, just having conversations, and that's really kind of what this show is about. I want it to be a little bit of a variety type thing, but though it's themed around this concealed carry and this gun realm, I really just want to have conversations. And I've had conversations with I got friends that are atheist and Muslim and different political backgrounds, different religious backgrounds. That's okay. We should be able to sit down and have a conversation.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, we can still be friends. We don't have to like hate each other. There's too much hate in the world. So I'm all about just being nice to our fellow man and not being jerks. And so anyway, so with that being said, the other story I want to talk about was my junior summer, and precursor, every night the week before this incident happened, I had been working late and I had a gun on me because on private property, you do not need a permit to carry a gun, to have a gun concealed. And,
plus, it made him feel cool.
I was a studly 17-year-old. And so, and mind you, I didn't know anything. But I had a gun.
Yeah.
And so every night that week, I'd been working late until about midnight, 1 o'clock, and doing paperwork. We were a busy gun store. We had 2 entrances, the pawn entrance and a retail entrance. And so I was doing paperwork. Back in the old days, we didn't have all this electronic crap where everything was on the computer for the ATF forms and the 4473. And everything was done manually. And so I was filing paperwork and writing things in and out of the
Guns
bound
logged
book.
into a logbook.
Yep. We did everything in a bound book. It was all handwritten, man. There was no electronic anything back then. So anyway, I was doing that, and then I was cleaning the pawn room, kind of reorganizing the pawn room, getting ready to bring in more stuff, and refacing shelves, and doing stuff like that in the summer. And so I'm working late every night that week with a handgun, a Charter Arms Bulldog 44 Special. I remember the gun, cheap little sloppy little holster, and because that's the only thing I had for it at the time. And so I'm carrying the gun every night this week, and it was Friday night, and I don't specifically remember what my mentality was, but I didn't have a gun on that night. If I were to speculate, I would probably say part of it was because there was other people there. So Joe and his best friend Andy were at the shop at the time.
Well, and you were there working. We just wheeled in. You just stopped.
Yeah.
Hey, what's going on?
Was it about 10:30, 11 o'clock?
Yeah,
I think
something
it was.
like that. Yeah,
it was
it was
pretty late.
Yeah.
And so Joe had gone back to my dad's office, which was kind of the other side of the building.
Yeah.
To talk to his girlfriend, his wife now, but at the time. So he was back there talking, and Andy and I were back in the pawn room. So there was a back entrance, and there was a wall with shelving that had TVs and VCRs on it. And then there was a little step up, a little entryway, and then there was a half desk where the pawn desk was.
Yeah.
And then directly to the left or the right of that there was another entrance that went in, or another door that went into a back room.
Yeah.
But that whole wall, that back wall, were all the guns, rifles, shotguns, kind of up high, and then pistol cases in front of that. So, and then there was another door that went into the pawn room. And Andy and I were in the back room talking, and we heard what sounded like an explosion and glass shatter. And I don't know why, but my first instinct was, if I remember right, we were lighting off fireworks or doing something earlier that day.
Probably had M80s.
M80s, yep. And that was my first thought.
Yeah.
Joe lit an M80 somewhere in the shop.
Like the M80s. Those were
and blew something up and broke it. And so I'm like, crap. So I stepped out of the pawn room up on this little step up, and I looked through the shelving, through the TVs and VCRs at the back door. And in time to see, and I'm going to talk about something else later, just kind of link all this up. But so I looked through the shelving, and here comes a big old bruiser with a baseball bat and a camouflage jacket running through the building. And I'm like, and I'm 17 years old, mind you. I don't know anything. Didn't have a gun. And so this man runs through the building, and as he gets just past the shelving, because he can't see me because I'm looking through this little slit, Andy was still in the back room. I didn't even know what he was doing, and we'll talk about what he was doing later. And this guy runs by, and he looks at me as he's running by, and I'm looking at him going, I'm 17 years old. I don't know nothing, man. I'm just like, what is happening right now? And so he runs by. As he's looking at me, he doesn't see these golf clubs and trips over these golf clubs. And he rolls over, and he's laying on his back with the bat clutched to his chest. And I'm like, what do I do? What in the heck? What's going on? I don't know anything. And I'm like befuddled by this whole thing. So my first instinct is to run out the door.
Fight or flight.
Flight. Yep. So I definitely took that flight. And so I run out the back door, and it didn't have a crash bar, but it had
a solid bar.
It had a solid bar with a square aluminum
handle
type thing on it. And so I run through there, and I came up too soon, and it caught my back and gashed my back open.
Which had glass previously to him coming, so you're going out the broken
right.
glass.
So I'm going out this door that has nothing in it in a handle, and I had a jacked up Toyota 4x4 with chrome roll bar and lights and the whole thing.
The Michael J. Fox Back to the Future.
Exactly. Toyota. That's exactly what it was. White Toyota, 86 Toyota 4x4. And so I run out to my truck, and I don't know why my first instinct was to get into my truck. And so I do something that I've done a million times, which is put the key in the door, try to unlock it. Well, as I'm trying to get my keys in the door, I drop my keys 4 times. 4 times. I'm like, and I don't know why I'm trying to get in my truck. I have no idea what the psychology is going on here. So as I'm trying to get it in, I finally get my key in the door, and just as I turn the lock, I remember just as I feeling it turn and unlock the door, I hear more glass shatter and what sounds like another explosion. And I'm going, crap, what is happening right now? Joe and Andy are still in there. I don't know what's going on. And I thought, you know what? I'm going to back my truck up. I'm going to hit my high beams, turn all my lights on, and I'm just going to mow this guy over when he comes out of the shop. That was my thought. And so I remember backing my truck up and facing it towards the door. All my lights are on. And I remember subconsciously revving the engine while I'm holding the clutch in. And next thing I know, I see this man step out of the building with the bat that he had, a .357 Magnum, and a box of shells. And in that moment, I'm thinking, maybe I could just pin him up against the building. I'm like, no, I'll squish him, and I'm like, in this idea of like running him over, I remember having second thoughts going, man, if I run him over, that's manslaughter, that's homicide. I remember having the kind of a second.
You did have a gun, so it could have been self-defense.
We'll talk about that. So I'm 17 years old. Like I said, I don't know nothing. None of us do. I mean, we're all high schoolers, Yeah. And so anyway, as I'm like second guessing myself, this man runs off into the alleyway. So, and the part that I kind of didn't talk about right up front is we knew this man.
Yeah.
This man was a good customer. I knew his aunts and uncles, grandma, grandpa, aunts and uncles, in-laws. Yeah. Remember Ralph and Mike Kessler? Yeah. So anyway, knew all these folks. He was a good customer and a nice guy.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right?
A nice guy.
And so I'm going, what is happening? I mean, that is another part that like
messes with your mind.
Yeah, messes with your mind. And I think, in this world of personal defense, and this is another thing that really re-geared the way I think about things and why I kind of approach it from a different angle than most people. Is that I knew this man, and in that instance where I had every right to do what I needed to do to protect myself. It was private property. I had a right to have a gun, carry a gun. I had a right to defend myself. He was within at one point, he was close enough that short range weapon, like a bat, could have been. It was basically all the parameters of imminent threat of great bodily harm or death, even with that short range weapon, because he was in a range where it could have been a lethal weapon, right? And so all the parameters are there for me to do what I had to do legally.
Could have done,
yeah. And I think about that. And so what we found out later, and that whole night I'm thinking, Sam's going to come kill me. Sam's going to come kill me. He's going to cave my head in with a baseball bat. And
he doesn't need the bat now. He's got the gun.
That's right. And so anyway, like I said, when he stepped out of the building, he had a gun, a box of shells, and the bat. And what we found out later is that the story was he was over drinking at a local bar, and he says somebody slipped him a Mickey. But here's what I know about alcohol: alcohol will amplify our emotions. And so he was already depressed. Mm-hmm. And so his reasoning for breaking in and stealing the gun was to shoot himself. He was going to blow his brains out. And so
he actually ended up on one of the bridges.
He did. Yeah. The bridge on the Oregon slope with a gun to his head. And this is, so my dad visited him in jail the next day. He basically had the gun to his head, was ready to do it, started thinking about his kids, had second thoughts, and went and turned himself in. And so when my dad found out he had turned himself in, he went and visited him. We didn't press charges.
No.
And this is when we found out this whole story. And the thing that I like to bring up, and one of the reasons I tell the story in my class, is because, like I said, from the aspect of imminent danger of great bodily harm or death, all the parameters were there to do what needed to shoot legally. And I think about that to this day, and I think about what this 17-year-old kid, what my life would have been like, knowing that I had taken another man's life. This man that I knew, a man that I knew to be a relatively upright person,
right?
In a moment making a bad choice.
Yeah. Which I would say, I'm in ministry. I'm a pastor. That's my daytime job. And so I'm trying to speak life into people all the time. And in regards to this situation with this man, if you're in that position, it is a temporary it is a permanent decision for a temporary problem.
Absolutely.
And your life is more valuable than that. Circumstances will change. And so I just speak life into that. And I'm thankful that Terry's decisions, even as panicked as he was, freaked out as he was, didn't change his life, as well as this man's life. And the man came to a senses at a point to not end his own life.
And here's what I can guarantee you, knowing what I know now, is that, my life psychologically, emotionally, mentally would have been entirely changed. And I can almost, I would say with a lot of certainty, probably wouldn't be where I am today had that have played out any other way. I know I would have lived the rest of my life with remorse and regret. All those things that happened in the emotional aftermath.
Yeah. So for the record, I was there, as he said earlier, but I was back in my dad's office talking to Jolene, which he mentioned that. So I hear all of this, but I did not see any of it. I got done with my phone call with my girlfriend, which is now my wife, and came out to see all the damage of the broken door, the broken showcases, and the gun missing, and then to hear, and my friend Andy, who was there as well, so with him in the back.
And he, what I found out later, and I'm so glad that neither one of us stepped into the back room, because he had grabbed a bow from the back pawn room, and knocked up an arrow and was pointing it at the door coming in. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I'm so glad I didn't step back in there. And I remember asking him, hey, do you mind if I, say your name, talking about the story? And he was like, I just remember grabbing a bow, knocking an arrow, and thinking, friend or foe,
and I'm like, he's describing it to me as walking with this bow and arrow, okay, when am I going to release? So.
And I'm just like, oh man, that could have been a catastrophe in itself, But anyway, and so it's just kind of funny, different perspective, because I don't know that we ever compared stories afterwards. I just, so part of the story too was, as a 17-year-old, I don't know what's going on. And when he steps out and I don't follow through with what I was thinking about doing, either pinning him against the wall or mowing him over with my truck, when he runs off into the alleyway, I took off towards the Fruitland Police Department, Gateway Junction, Highway 95. And I was doing 100 miles an hour by the time I hit in my little Toyota. By the time I got to the police station, and I come just skipping into the police parking lot. Well, you know what? One of those things you don't know when you're 17 years old.
At 10:30, there's no one there.
There's nobody there. The lights are off. There's nobody home. All the cruisers are out on patrol.
All two of them
in Fruitland, Idaho. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, So by the time I got back to the shop, Stephanie Steele, who was the only lady cop in Fruitland, she was at Stinker Station, if I remember right, and she had they usually pulled through the parking lot to kind of light up the doors and check doors and back then. And so she had showed up and saw the busted glass. Yeah. So when I get there, she's inside, I think, talking to you and Andy.
Yeah.
And I don't even remember any of that conversation.
Right.
Anything that would happen. I don't remember her even asking me questions.
Right.
Do you remember her asking questions?
I don't see, even you bringing it up, I don't remember her being there.
Yeah, she showed up later. And when I realized that nobody was at the Fruitland PD and I hit 100 miles an hour coming back through Gateway Junction.
Yeah, because you potentially left Andy and I for dead there.
Like I said, I'm 17 years old. I don't know nothing. And you're thinking, okay, hindsight, you're going, and of course you have to realize too, this is back in the days when we didn't really have cell phones. I think we had pagers. If I remember right, I had a pager.
Maybe, yeah.
The dad could get a hold of me if he needed me.
Well, that would have been in the early 80s.
Yeah, 80. It would have been 85.
I graduated. Yeah, that's right.
84, 85. Somewhere in there.
Mid-80s.
And so I think we had pagers.
Pagers, maybe,
yeah. And so, and there was a phone right there. We did have landlines. I could have just called 911, but when you're in panic, and I know so much more about psychology today, and I that's why I approach things so differently, because I'm like, I remember what it was like to be a mindless 17-year-old and thinking, man,
Now you know what it's like to be a mindless 50-year-old.
exactly right. I get that a lot. Yeah. And so anyway, it was just a really crazy time. And I remember, in fact, I talked to this gentleman's brother-in-law a couple of years ago. I think it was last year, maybe 2 years ago. I asked him how he was doing. He was doing good. And, but I think, man, my whole life's trajectory would have changed in that moment if I would have done something altered or different than what I did.
Yeah.
And I think, man, I thank God to this day that things panned out the way they panned out.
Well, in the same token, going back to our story with the shotgun, that would have altered my life had that went worse. You know, losing a brother, or and what another part of that first story where I shot him, there was shells, ammo underneath the gun.
Story. The practical joke.
No, but we there was ammo and literally those, what do you call it,
number six
bird shot had peppered a full case of those shotgun shells.
It blasted a whole section of ammo.
Yeah,
because the rifles and shotguns were above and then below was all the ammo behind the pistol cases, and it peppered.
Yeah, ricocheted off the floor, blew a hole in the carpet onto the cement, and then ricocheted up.
Hit me in the calves, hit the light, and then it peppered all of these boxes of shells.
That's how I knew you were hit. I'm like, there's no way that glass would be broke without you taking some of that.
And the interesting thing is, and you can't see it here, but this black spot right here on my thigh is the highest I got hit. Everything hit my calves, but one hit me right here in the thigh. That was the highest I got hit. But then it took out a light that was right above my head.
It's a wonder. And so it's a wonder that he survived that blast. But with the shot going into the shotgun shells, many of them grazed primers, went through the shot, the wadding. Any one of those got hit, that would alter all of us.
It would have World War III, where one shot hit another shot. Yeah. I mean, we were that's God's divine.
Yeah, we were blessed in that each
plan.
time.
And it's that whole childhood thing, grabbing guns from the shop. I've blown barrels off of guns. I've had slugs graze my ears out hunting on the islands, shotgun slugs.
Yeah.
And it was my wife that was like, God's given you too many opportunities to not be here. I think he's trying to tell you something. So,
he's a slow listener. So,
and so it really geared me to do what I do today. And so I was talking to somebody this morning. They're like, man, I wish I had stories to tell like you've got. And I'm like, yeah, maybe. I mean, I'm lucky I survived them. But one of the practical jokes we pulled on, so knowing that it peppered all these shells, we took all those shells out of the boxes. And like the shotgun shells, we cut the tops off, dumped out all the shot, the wadding, powder, everything. So all that was left was this husk. And so
with the primer shell, that's all that was left.
And so it was, how long after was it?
Wasn't long. And
a couple weeks maybe?
Yeah, maybe in a month or so. Or something. Because people would come in the stores like,
is Joe shooting today? Is Joe here today? Is it open season? People always poke their head in.
Yeah.
Joe around today?
Enter with caution.
And so anyway, we had all these shells that we had emptied all the stuff out of because they were just no good anymore. And so Joe grabs a single shot shotgun. And he goes, hey, Terry, when I press the trigger, just yell, ouch.
Yeah.
And so,
and at this point, the Rose he mentioned early, she's a 74-year-old lady that's working for us, and she's putting up fish hooks on the pegboard. And I warned her what I was doing because I didn't want to be responsible for a heart attack. And so, learning from the first incident of the real potential damage.
Weeks after I had really been shot.
Yeah.
So he grabs a single shot shotgun, and so I was standing here. He was standing here
behind the showcase.
And I was talking to his wife.
Yeah.
And she was mid-sentence, and so Joe, he didn't have the gun pointed at me. It was
pointed
off the side, but from where his wife was standing, it looked like it was pointed right at me. And so he pressed the trigger, and it was pretty loud for just a primer.
Yeah, primers are loud.
It goes boom, and instead of yelling ouch. I don't know why. It was like this total spontaneous thing. I just dropped to the ground on my back. And I think it freaked you out too.
It did. It's like, I'm like,
so
Terry, just say out when this goes off. And so that's what I'm expecting. And so my wife's walking up, talking, da, 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 boom. And he drops to the floor, and my face is just like,
he thinks he shot me again.
No, I knew I didn't shoot you, but I was so impressed with how you, I mean, it wasn't like just falling over. It was like he kicked his feet out from under him and just flatlined right to the floor. It was just like, dang, that's serious, man.
I should have been an actor.
And Jolene, she's like,
she was mid-sentence. It was like, and boom. She was just like dumbfounded. She could not speak. And when I jumped up and started laughing, and Joe starts laughing, I thought she was going to pummel you, man. She came over, she was like, you jerk. She's just pounding on him.
Abuse.
So anyway, another one of those like really dumb things that
a story we have to share.
the story, yeah. And so I always tell these. I don't tell that story in my classes, but I do talk about the Sam incident. I do talk about my dad almost blowing my mom's head off with a shotgun, and like I said, I've been out hunting on the islands where a friend took a shot at a deer in the water. That slug ricocheted off the water, and I'm standing there watching, and literally a slug grazed my ear. And this is when I was married to my first wife, and I grabbed her and just threw her to the ground as I kind of hit the deck, and two more shots glanced over the top of us, and I'm like, that's where. So Jessica, my second wife, my current wife, she's the one that really spurred me. She's like, you're too passionate about this, and there's just too much there for you to. God's given you too many opportunities, because I honestly shouldn't be here. I mean, I remember blowing a shotgun barrel off a shotgun hunting ducks down on the islands, where I had powder burns on my face, and I mean, just so many times things that go pop, boom, or bang.
We like those things, but you got to be careful.
Have blown up. And did you ever know that story of when Dad and I? Because I was a goldsmith. I used to size and jewelry and do stone setting, and Dad and I were back in this little jeweler's room where I would spend a lot of time.
Oh, it's a converted bathroom.
Yeah, so it's like this little tiny
small
thing where I had a bench and a soldering station, and we had one of those chemical acetylene things. Mm-hmm. It wasn't oxygen in acetylene set. It was actually, you poured chemicals in it, and it would somehow like create this flame, microtorch. And it wasn't working. So Dad and I were looking at it, and we had both picked it up, had the cap off of it, and we're looking down this little hole where all the chemicals go, and one of us had inadvertently turned it on. And we're looking down the center of this, and it's just boom out the top in that little tiny room. It just sounded like a tank going off in there. And I'm like, either one of us could have put our eye out or blown something off. And I just think about all of those stories as a kid that just led me to where I am today. And it's crazy. It also kind of started, I think, with Dad and that black powder thing, almost blowing Mom's head off.
Yeah.
And
then the Widowmaker.
And that's the thing, just lack of education. I mean, he didn't know better. And I mean, it really upset him. It altered. And when I had my wife on, we'll talk about some of her, there was some trauma in her childhood. And I remember when I first started really teaching her how to shoot, it was an emotional thing for her. Mm-hmm. Every time she'd pick up a gun, she'd get about 3 rounds, and then she'd be in tears. Mm. And so, our psyche gets changed by some of some of those things that happen to us. Yeah, those experiences really alter. And so, I spend a lot of time talking about psychology. And I know, and even going back to the night we got broke into with Sam, back then, of course, his family was like, he wouldn't hurt you, and I would have believed that. I believed that back then. And the more I know about psychology, because I know good people that have stepped across that line of that moral boundary, and the minute you step across that line, all bets are off. Our psyche goes places that we never think were possible. And even talking about, Joe was kind of talking about the light, and I'm a big advocate of it too, because I've been on that side. Joe remembers I went through a divorce where I was depressed. I became homicidal/suicidal. I've had a Glock in my mouth at least a dozen times, ready to call it quits. And
divorce is hard. I was going through the divorce. I never understood the magnitude of how hard it was. Until I watched him go through it. And he calls me one day asking me to pick him up from the hospital after not hearing from him for 3 days. And it was like,
and it was so funny because I'm like, and it was all over a migraine headache. It was stress,
Yeah, but I just had visions of him with that gun and taking his head off down by the river or something. And it's like,
and I remember my dad driving ditch banks looking for my body, thinking and looking for two particular individuals that I could have very easily, in that moment, in the state of mind that I was in, done something really dumb. And I think through that trauma, I always tell people, we always think we're in control of our minds. When we hit depression, sometimes we go places we never think were possible. And I was in that place. I was in a place where I wasn't in control. And so that has led me to where I am today, where I actually I have talked people off the ledge because I know that darkness. And
we're living in a time, and I'm not wanting to go political. I'm not trying to, but with all the stuff that's going on in our world, a lot of it has to do with mental health.
Absolutely.
Learning how to deal with mental health,
how to cope with things. And I don't know, that's one of the things that I try to pride myself on these days. If I feel like God's put somebody on my heart, I pick up the phone and call them, because I don't know how many friends I've called and said,
God must not be speaking to him about his brother.
But I've literally had friends call me up later and go, like, you have no idea how important it was that you called when you called. And, and I'll talk about this in another episode, but I think God gave me premonition, or gave me like, what's the word I'm trying to find? Just a good idea of things that are happening or going on that aren't necessarily things we understand. And I used to ignore it as a kid, and it cost me dearly emotionally. And I'll talk about that incident in another episode, but because I didn't know how to understand it. I didn't understand that intuition. I didn't understand what it was, what to do with it. And then I got better at understanding it. And now I try not to ignore that. And I think that's something that we can, just like going to the gym and working those muscles out. God gives us all, I think, some intuition, and we learn to ignore it instead of learning how to read it and how to understand it. And so I've gotten a lot better at understanding that intuition these days. And even out on the range when I've had guns pointed at me. So anyway, all right. Well, I think that will probably do it for today. I'll probably have Joe on another time. It'll probably be remotely because he actually lives in Washington. And so just talk a little bit about your church. I like whoever comes on. I have a lot of friends that are entrepreneurs, and I like to talk about their businesses too.
Okay.
And so,
well, we've been there December 3rd, 2017, at Summit Christian Center in Tacoma, Washington. A small church, but a wonderful body. And for me, it's been an incredible journey through everything that I've gone through in my life in ministry, that I feel God has prepared me for this position and this church. And so
it's a never-ending learning curve.
Yeah, it is a never-ending learning curve. But it's obviously COVID affected not just the church, but everybody. So we're had to change up things with that. And I believe we're on the way out of that, and we're doing well. I love Tacoma. I have friends who tell me all the time, they're liberal up there. You're in a liberal place. Like, yes, even God took the children of Israel into the enemy lands. And so
now we're getting religious and political.
There we go. So I'm good with where I'm at. I love it there. The people are great to us. And so, Summit is a cool place to hang out. We do it online now because of COVID, as well as physical gatherings on Sundays. And we're getting ready to do a big outreach in July where we have another church that's coming up to use us as a missions outreach to paint our church and do some repair. And then we're going to be doing a furniture and food giveaway on July 17th for our community. So I'm really excited about that and how God is putting all that together for us, and just blessing us with wonderful people and an opportunity to speak life and encourage people that there is hope, there is a light, and there is something that can make a difference in your life. So,
and all my friends that know me, my philosophy is let's just be better people. Let's be more generous and nicer to those around us than we are ourselves. And then we'd change the climate of this world. And so just be nice, never judge a man until you walked a mile in his shoes, and just be nice to people.
Even then, you'll still judge them.
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, that's us signing out. Thanks for joining us, and we will see you next episode. So just preview, I'm supposed to have Ron Martinez on next week. Not sure yet. So if he doesn't show up, we'll have another guest speaker. But anyway, thanks for joining us, and stay tuned for more episodes. Have a great day.